Modern science believes that the fossils in the geologic column are millions of years old and were created over millions of years. In fact, specimens are not even considered fossils unless they are over 10,000 years old. Fossils are generally dated by radiometric dating, which scientists believe give their absolute age, and stratigraphy, which gives only relative ages. Absolute dating is a misnomer, as scientists themselves recognize. The term implies certainty and accuracy, which is not warranted. Any dating reliant on radiometric dating cannot be considered even remotely accurate, let alone absolute, given its record on verifiable artifacts. For example, using the potassium-argon radiometric method, scientists achieved results that are demonstrably incorrect. Hawaiian lava flows were almost 3 billion years older than their observed formation in the 19th century. Other tests of radiometric dating on specimens with known dates of origin and, in some cases, even living animals have also produced extremely anomalous results. Stratigraphy does not date anything, rock or fossil. It simply places fossils and strata in sequential order. Moreover, stratigraphy has its own problems. Strata are not continuous, being broken up or eroded away. Fossils have to be matched globally, which is difficult and subject to misidentification. Scientists have proposed several processes for the formation of fossils. These include permineralization, where animal tissue is replaced by minerals, which takes the shape of the original organism; petrification, where specimens become rock through permineralization; and casting, where organisms decay away but leave an imprint of the original. Whatever the process, fossilization requires two conditions to succeed: immediate burial and a long period of time. Burial by sediment ensures that specimens will not first decay. Long periods of time are required for the slow process of permineralization. Scientists recognize there are serious problems with the burial scenario of fossilization. They know that the decomposition of organisms occurs quickly, which would prevent permineralization in almost all cases. As one scientist put it, fossilization is in a race against decay. For fossilization to win this race, a sudden and complete burial of an organism is necessary to prevent inevitable decay, not to mention scavenging. But such burials are unlikely, occurring predominantly under catastrophic conditions. Sudden burial of dead or dying animals faces another major problem. For a dead animal to be buried, it must first fall to the bottom of an ocean or lake. But dead animals, as we all know, normally float. Paleobiologists at the City University of New York found this to be a major impediment in their studies of the formation of fossils. Scientists also know that permineralization can occur under certain conditions almost instantaneously. In fact, artificial permineralization has been successfully achieved in the laboratory. Artificial petrification can also be achieved in the laboratory. The enormous periods of time believed to be necessary to these processes are, in fact, not. Scientists will grudgingly admit to problems with their storybook theory of animals dying, sinking to the bottom of the sea, being buried by silt, and then being changed to stone over aeons of time. But the story never changes, nor are alternatives offered. The reality is that the geologic column and its dating was set in stone, as it were, long before scientists even began to seriously study how animals decay and fossilize. Science only began to seriously and systematically study how organisms decay and become fossilized in 1949, when taphonomy was first introduced. The geologic scale, on the other hand, has been in use since the early 19th century. Whatever new evidence science finds, the scale itself will not change. There are too many vested interests in maintaining the story. Science even encodes fossilization into its definitions. Fossils are not fossils unless they are at least 10,000 years old. Definitions like these ensure that the theoretical status quo is maintained. But, of course, nature is not bound to the artificial rules of science. The questions pertinent to our thesis can now be asked. What if there have been mass extinction and fossilization events in far more recent times than are claimed? What if fossilization naturally occurred over minutes or hours instead of tens of thousands or millions of years? What if there is another process, not recognized by modern science, for instantaneous fossilization? What if the geologic scale is fundamentally flawed and needs to be wholly and radically reassessed? Science has falsified its own foundational claims for the geologic scale and the process of fossilization. This opens up the possibility of much more recent fossilization events over dramatically reduced time. We propose that the Exodus event was such an event. And we know that interplanetary electrical discharges and giant plasmoids were present in abundance during the Exodus. The immense power of the plasmoids striking the oceans heated the waters to the boiling point. Laboratories have shown that plasmoids can even set water on fire. During a major event like the Exodus, and the Apocalypse for that matter, large plasmoids would form under and across the ocean surface. In addition to heating the seawater, it would instantly transform large areas of seawater into rock. All life forms within the area would be fossilized as well. This explains fossils embedded within a fossilized medium, such as these ammonites. These fish could only have been fossilized in an instant while still swimming. The rock which encases them must have been fossilized at the same time. Fossilization requires the replacement of an organism's original material with rock-forming minerals. For plasma to bring about fossilization, it would do so by transmuting the original elements in place. That would include the fossilization of the water medium as well as the organisms in the water. Plasma is known to have the ability to transmute elements in water solutions. In fact, the transmutation of water by plasma has been commercialized. For plasma to create the fossils of the famous Jurassic Coast, it would have simultaneously transmuted the seawater into limestone, which encases the fossils. Archaeologist Peter Mungo Jupe offered a possible process for this event. Of course, we can only speculate that it was plasma that created the fossils of the geologic column. To our knowledge, there are no ancient eyewitness accounts to fossilization, but the knife cuts both ways. Paleontologists can only speculate as to the origin of the fossil record in the absence of reliable eyewitness accounts. The point here, however, is that plasma fossilization is possible. All the processes necessary for fossilization by plasma or electric discharge have been demonstrated in the laboratory. Recently, there has been definitive confirmation that the electrical force can actually produce a fossil. In Canada, 5 tree stumps were instantaneously petrified through contact with a power line. The stumps of trees living 5 years ago were changed to silica and had all the characteristics of a petrified tree. Of course, scientists would not call it a fossil, since it is younger than 10,000 years old. Peter Mungo Jupe tells the story.
But what evidence do we have that electrical phenomena can cause elements to transmute to another form, e.g. water to calcium? What tool of nature fossilized these once watery marine ammonites? We have a powerful clue. Now, this is a formational study done by Eric Milton. He described the examination of a petrified tree trunk, essentially water and carbon, in Alberta, Canada. And I'll quote him. The piece, this is the wood, was pure silica inside. It was coated with a rougher, opaque crust of partially fused sand. The tree whose stump was petrified was alive 5 years ago. After the tree was cut down to accommodate the right-of-way for a new power transmission line, an accidental break allowed the 5 high-voltage wire contact several tree stumps still in the ground. Power was cut off within hours of the break. All of the tree roots which contacted the broken wires were fossilized. Obviously, the extremes of electricity can metamorphosize matter quickly.
The argument for the Exodus and the Apocalypse being extinction and fossilization events does not rely wholly on geologic evidence. Chronology has something to say as well. Geologists and paleontologists claim that the layers of fossils comprising the fossil record were created over hundreds of millions of years. The oldest fossils were formed about 4 billion years ago, The major extinction events, which were also fossilization events, range from 65 to 450 million years ago. Yet, this cannot be. We know from Scripture that life has been on this planet for about 6,000 years. In his apocalyptic vision, the Apostle John saw a book sealed with 7 seals. And while working on his inspired translation, Joseph Smith asked the Lord about the book and its meaning. The Lord responded by explaining that each of the seals represented 1,000 years of the Earth's temporal existence. In all, the Earth will temporally exist for 7,000 years. Currently, we are at the end of the 6th seal, meaning that the Earth has temporarily existed for 6,000 years to date. This means that life on this planet and all events associated with living things are bounded by the Earth's temporal existence. All dating systems and claims of age, including fossils, are constrained to 6,000 years ago or more recent. Every extinction event and every fossilization event occurred less than 6,000 years ago. Extinction and fossilization events took less than 6,000 years combined. The constraint of 6,000 years requires a wholesale reassessment of the geologic record. The current paradigm cannot be maintained. Extinction events, however many there were, occurred recently and within the time of man on Earth. That means man witnessed each extinction event and was also a victim of the global catastrophe that killed off entire species. As a witness to these events, man must have known of them and recorded them. The Bible records several major catastrophes. The flood of Noah, of course, is the most famous, killing all land life on Earth except those few animals preserved in the ark. Of course, this means that the flood was a near-total extinction event for terrestrial animals. Though the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah appears to be a local event, the daughters of Lot thought the catastrophe had killed off all men on the earth. The Book of Ether in the Book of Mormon clarifies the incident of the Tower of Babel as extending beyond the land of Shinar. When sailing to the Promised Lands, the Jaredite barges were tossed about and submerged by terrible tempests and were driven forward by a fierce wind. The fierce wind continued for almost a year. The Book of Moses in the Pearl of Great Price records that the time of Enoch was filled with geologic upheaval. The Book of Mormon describes the destruction of the Promised Land after the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. The severity of the destruction denotes a major catastrophe of the first order. And we know that the crucifixion event was a global one from the prophecies of Xenos. Each of these events must have left their mark on the Earth, and each of them must be reflected in the fossil record.